wind screamed across Red Mesa like a wounded beast, rolling down from the frozen ridges and scouring the land clean of all warmth. Snow fell sideways, hard and bitter, carried by the kind of cold that bit straight through skin and bone. The cottonwoods bent beneath it, their branches heavy with ice. Far below, the valley stretched pale and empty, a white sea under a gray sky. Clara Wynn trudged through it, her boots sinking deep into the drifts. A torn shawl clung to her shoulders, its edges stiff with frost. One hand pressed against her swollen belly. 6 months, maybe more, and the other cradled her daughter tight against her chest. Little Nita was quiet now, too quiet, her tiny face buried in the folds of Clara's coat. The silence frightened her more than the wind. A week ago, she'd still been among her people, the Apache who'd raised her halfway between two worlds. But when the elders learned she carried the child of a white rancher, Cole Ashford, dead now, hung for crimes she never understood, they turned their backs. She remembered their eyes that day, filled not with anger, but with something colder, shame. They said her blood had been mixed too long, that the spirits no longer walked beside her, so she walked alone. Each step sent a pulse of pain through her legs, but she didn't dare stop. The sun was gone behind the clouds. She couldn't tell how long she'd been walking. Her breath came out in ragged plumes that froze midair. In her mind, she heard her grandmother's voice, soft and far away. "The land will test you, child, to see if you're still part of it." A sound broke through the wind. A creak, a groan of wood, a wagon wheel. She turned, spotting a mule cart half buried in the drift. Zeke Dobbs, the driver she'd hired in the last settlement, was unhooking the mule from its harness. His shoulders hunched against the cold, and his face, rough and weathered, didn't turn her way. "Zeke!" she shouted. Her voice cracked. "Please, wait!" He flinched but didn't stop. "Ain't no more road this way," he muttered. "You keep going, you'll freeze." "Just help me reach the hills," she begged, but he swung himself up on the mule's bare back. "Ain't my job to carry trouble." His tone was flat, final. And then he was gone, just a blur moving through the snow, leaving her with nothing but the squeal of hooves fading into the wind. For a long time, Clara stood there, holding Nita close, the snow thickening around them. She wanted to scream after him, but no sound came. Only the ache in her throat, the fire in her lungs, and the weight of a life that seemed to grow heavier by the hour. When her knees buckled, she dropped beside a stunted cedar tree and tried to catch her breath. Her lips were split, her hands trembling. She looked down at her daughter. Nita's lashes rimed with frost, her tiny mouth open in shallow breaths. "Hold on, baby," she whispered. "Mama's still here." But she wasn't sure how much longer that would be true. The sky darkened, the kind of twilight that came too early in winter. She could smell the storm before it arrived, the iron tang of snow and pine. The horizon blurred, and she thought she saw shapes moving through the haze. The outline of old spirits, the kind her people once spoke of, women made of smoke, their arms outstretched. "Not yet," she murmured, "not yet." Clara forced herself upright, one step, then another. The pain in her back clawed upward. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. She tried to hum to Nita, an old lullaby her mother used to sing by the fire, but her voice cracked halfway through. The sound faded into the wind. She climbed toward the ridge, hoping for shelter, for anything. The ground rose beneath her, rough with frozen sage and rock. Her boots slipped. She caught herself on her hands, gasping. Her belly tightened with every movement. Then through the white curtain of snow, she saw it, a faint glow on the slope above. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks, but it flickered again. Orange, alive, a fire. Her heart lurched. She took another step and another until her legs gave out. The last thing she saw was the blur of flame through the storm, a golden light swaying against the darkness. Somewhere beyond that light, a shadow moved, a tall figure, standing still as stone, watching her. Clara tried to call out, but the word froze on her tongue. Her body sagged, her knees hit the snow. She felt Nita slip slightly in her arms and clutched the child close, whispering one last breath of prayer to the wind. Then everything went silent. The firelight flickered once more, painting the snow in amber before the storm swallowed it whole. When Clara woke, the first thing she felt was heat. Real heat, Not the burning bite of cold, but the kind that reached deep into her bones. A low fire crackled somewhere close, and the smell of smoke and pine filled the air. She blinked, her lashes stiff with frost, and tried to move. Her whole body ached. The room around her was small, made of rough pine boards and shadow. Snow dusted the windowsills. Animal hides hung on the walls. A rifle leaned by the door. She was lying on a cot covered in wool blankets that smelled of cedar and smoke. Something stirred near the fire. A man knelt there, feeding a log into the flames. His shoulders were broad beneath a worn flannel shirt, his beard peppered with gray. A long scar cut across one cheek, pale against his weathered skin. He didn't turn as he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're awake." Clara tried to sit up, but a sharp pain lanced through her back. Where's my daughter?" He nodded toward the far corner. Little Nita was bundled in a blanket near the hearth, fast asleep, her small hands clutching a wooden toy horse. Relief made Clara's eyes sting. "You carried us here?" she asked. The man finally looked at her. His eyes were a color between gray and blue, like winter sky over stone. "Found you by the ridge," he said. "Didn't look like you'd make it through the night." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Why'd you help us?" He poked the fire with an iron rod, watching the sparks leap. "Didn't feel like digging graves today." His tone was flat, almost indifferent, but there was no cruelty in it, just exhaustion, the kind that comes from too many winters spent alone. Clara's throat tightened. "You could have left us there." "Sure, Yeah," he said, turning back to the fire. "Could have." The silence stretched, filled only by the popping of resin in the wood. Clara studied him in the glow. He was rough-looking, yes, but not wild. The way he moved, deliberate, calm, reminded her of someone who'd known command once. He caught her staring. "Name's Bo Ransom," he said. "This here's my place." "Clara Wynn," she whispered. He gave a small nod. "You Apache?" Her hand went instinctively to her necklace, a beaded strand of red and bone. "Half." Bo said nothing more. He stood, poured hot water from a kettle into a tin cup, and handed it to her. "Drink. You'll need it." Clara hesitated, then took it. The water was bitter but warm, and it steadied her shaking hands. Nita stirred then, mumbling in half-asleep Apache. "Ash Key." "Boy," she pointed toward Bo. He raised an eyebrow. "That what she's calling me?" Clara almost smiled. "Means boy." "Well," Bo said, a corner of his mouth twitching, "I've been called worse." For the first time, the tension eased. Bo crouched to check on Nita, pulling the blanket higher over her shoulder. The sight, this gruff mountain man tending a sleeping child, did something to Clara she couldn't name. She watched him quietly, her fear softening into something closer to wonder. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside the cabin it was warm enough that her fingers began to tingle. Bo returned to the chair by the fire and poured himself coffee from an old tin pot. He didn't offer conversation, and Clara didn't ask questions. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full, like the stillness before dawn. After a while, he spoke again, voice softer now. "You should rest. Storm's still coming down hard. You and the little one stay till it passes?" Clara hesitated. "And after that?" He shrugged. "After that, you'll know where you're going." She wanted to ask what he meant, but her body was too tired to argue. She lay back, eyes fixed on the fire. The flames flickered across Bo's face, carving shadows into his scar and catching the dull glint in his eyes. A sorrow buried too deep for words. He stared into the blaze as though it held ghosts. Nita murmured again, rolling onto her side, her small breaths steady. Clara felt herself drift toward sleep. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't shaking from cold. Bo rose, went to the door, and cracked it open. The wind hissed through the gap, carrying snowflakes that caught the firelight like sparks. He stood there a long moment, staring into the storm. Then he closed the door, sealing the warmth in. Outside, the snow kept falling, white and endless. But inside, the fire burned steady, painting the room in golden quiet. The days that followed blurred into the steady rhythm of survival. The storm outside never seemed to end. It roared down from the ridges like a living thing, howling through the pines, shaking the shutters on Bo Ransom's old cabin. But inside, for the first time in a long while, warmth lived again. Clara moved carefully at first, like someone learning to walk in a new life. She mended one of Bo's shirts by the window, her stitches small but sure. When he came in from the barn, his hands red from the cold, she had stew simmering over the fire. The smell of beans and venison filled the air, rich and comforting. "You didn't have to," he said gruffly. "I know," she replied, stirring without looking up. "But you look like you haven't eaten right in weeks." Bo gave a short grunt that might have been a laugh, or maybe it was just surprise. Little Nita followed him everywhere, trailing her small boots through the dirt floor. Bo taught her to feed the horses, holding her tiny hands steady as she scattered oats. The mare snorted softly, and Nita giggled, a bright sound that didn't belong in such a lonely place. "She likes you," Clara said from the doorway, her face half lit by the afternoon sun. Bo adjusted his hat, embarrassed. "Most folks don't." "She's not most folks," Clara murmured. In the evenings, when the wind screamed like a train through the mountains, Bo would sit near the fire while Clara taught Nita Apache words. Simple ones, like toe for water and she for sun. Bo pretended not to listen, but sometimes he repeated one quietly under his breath, rolling the syllables slow and careful, like a man afraid to break something fragile. "You say it like this," Clara corrected, smiling faintly. He tried again, and this time she laughed, a sound soft enough to make him glance up. It had been years since he'd heard laughter in that cabin. That night, the storm came back stronger than before. The wind pressed against the walls like a giant's hand, and the snow piled high against the door. The fire popped and hissed as the smoke turned thick. Bo was half asleep in his chair when he smelled it. Burning wood, sharp and fast. The chimney had clogged with ice. The flames curled wrong, climbing the wall instead of the flue. "Clara!" he shouted. She jerked awake. The air was already turning black. Nita coughed in her sleep, her small body shaking. Bo was on his feet in a heartbeat. He threw his coat over the girl, scooped her up, and barreled through the cabin door. The cold hit like a hammer, but he didn't stop until they were outside, the wind tearing at his face. Behind him, Clara stumbled out, gasping. She looked at him, Bo standing there in the snow, holding Nita tight against his chest, the fire's glow spilling through the cabin window like a wound. He turned back, re-entered without a word. Moments later, he returned, coughing, his beard dusted with ash. The smoke thinned. The worst of it was out. When he finally set Nita down, Clara was crying. Not out of fear, out of something deeper. "You saved her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't even think." Bo knelt beside the girl, brushing soot from her cheek. "Didn't have time to." Clara's tears streaked her face. For months she'd carried her child through hunger and snow, never trusting another soul. Yet here, in this forgotten corner of the mountains, a man she barely knew had risked his life for them without hesitation. Bo saw the look in her eyes and turned away, uncomfortable. "Get some air," he muttered. "Smoke'll choke you up." She didn't move. Instead, she reached out and touched his sleeve. "Bo." He froze. "You don't have to keep us here," she said softly. "You've done more than enough." The snow swirled between them, a whispering veil of white. Bo's eyes met hers, tired, haunted, but steady. He thought of the graves behind his cabin, the ones he never spoke of. "Maybe I do," he said. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the wind moved, carrying the scent of pine and ash across the hollow. Inside, the fire had died down to glowing coals flickering against the window pane. Bo looked back once more at Clara and the little girl standing beside her, their hair tangled, faces smudged with soot and snow. Somehow the storm didn't seem so loud anymore. The storm rolled down from the mountains before dawn, thick and mean, the kind that made men lose their way a few steps from their own door. By the time the first light touched Red Mesa, the cabin was buried to the windowsills, and the wind howled like wolves circling the ridge. Inside, Clara's cries cut through the storm. Bo had faced blizzards, gunfire, even the sound of death when the fever took his wife and boy. But this sound clawed at something deeper. He stood helpless by the fire, his hands shaking. "Bo!" Clara's voice broke, sweat glistening on her forehead despite the cold. "It's coming." He swallowed hard. "All right, just tell me what to do." She was on the floor near the hearth, wrapped in blankets. Nita sat nearby, frightened but quiet, clutching the wooden horse Bo had carved for her days before. The air smelled of smoke and pine resin. Every creak of the wind outside felt like the cabin might come apart. Bo knelt beside Clara, his rough hands useless against her pain. "You've done harder things than this," he murmured, mostly to himself. She gritted her teeth, eyes wild with both fear and strength. "Not alone," she whispered. "You ain't alone now." The words came from him before he'd thought them through. He poured warm water, tore strips from an old linen shirt, did what instinct told him to do. The fire snapped and roared, shadows dancing on the log walls. Hours dragged on. The storm beat harder. The roof moaned under the weight of snow. Clara's voice faded to hoarse whispers, each cry weaker than the last. Bo pressed a damp cloth to her brow, murmuring words he hadn't used in years. "Easy now. You just breathe. You got this." When the first cry of the baby came, it was so sharp and clean it stopped the wind in its tracks. For a heartbeat, even the storm seemed to listen. Bo sat back, eyes wide, chest tight. He'd seen life leave bodies before, never arrive like this, fragile and fierce all at once. Clara held the baby close, tears mixing with sweat on her cheeks. "It's a boy," she whispered. Bo smiled, slow and disbelieving. "Well, I'll be damned." Nita crept forward, eyes wide, and Bo lifted her up to see. "This your brother now, little one?" She leaned in and kissed the baby's forehead, whispering something soft in Apache. Words Bo didn't understand, but felt deep in his bones. Clara looked at him. He should have a name. Bo stared into the fire, thinking of the river that ran below the mesa, frozen now but still alive beneath the ice. "Wade," he said finally, "means to walk through the river and live." She repeated it, the name like a prayer on her lips. Wade Ransom. Outside, the wind began to ease, like even the storm had grown tired. The firelight caught the tiny movements of the newborn, his small fists, his breathing, his fragile heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the world beyond the walls. Bo rose and stepped to the doorway, needing air. He pushed it open, snow gusting in, biting at his face. The world outside was blinding white, the sky gray and wide. He stood there a long time listening. He thought of his own boy, Koa, gone 2 winters past. He could still see the fever taking him, hear Luta's voice calling through the night. For months after, Bo had sat on that porch, waiting for something to make sense again. Nothing ever had, until now. From inside came the soft cooing of a baby, the murmur of Clara's tired voice, the light giggle of Nita trying to hush her brother. Bo closed his eyes, and for the first time since his family died, he didn't feel alone. The snow kept falling, gentle now. It covered everything. The broken fence, the forgotten tools, the old graves behind the barn. All of it wrapped in white, like the land itself was beginning again. He sank onto the step, hands clasped, breath steaming in the cold. Somewhere in the whistle of the wind through the pines, he swore he heard a boy's laughter. Faint, far away, but real. Bo smiled into the storm. "Rest easy, son," he whispered. "Your old man's still here." Inside, Clara hummed softly to the newborn. The fire glowed, steady and gold, casting warmth that reached the cracks of every dark corner in that lonely mountain home. The child born of winter had come into the world with the storm, and somehow by morning, the storm had broken. By the time spring reached Red Mesa, the snow had pulled back from the ridges, leaving the earth soft and red beneath the sunlight. Shoots of grass poked through the melt, and the river below the cabin began to move again, slow and brown from all the thaw. Bo Ransom was fixing a broken gatepost when he heard the sound. Hooves, more than one horse coming steady up the old trail. He froze, hammer in hand. That trail hadn't seen riders since the blizzard. Clara stepped out of the cabin, Wade wrapped in a woven blanket against her chest, Nita clinging to her skirts. The look on Bo's face made her heart quicken. "You expecting company?" she asked. He shook his head once. "No, ma'am. The riders appeared over the ridge a minute later. 4 of them. Their silhouettes cut sharp against the bright sky, dust rising around their horses' legs. Bo set down his hammer and reached for the rifle leaning on the fence. The man in front raised a hand in greeting. He wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face. His beard was gray, his posture stiff but respectful. Behind him rode a deputy with a badge on his vest. Hank Carrick, Bo noticed. And 2 others, younger, meaner-looking, Jed Holt and Royce Kellen. "Mr. Ransom," the gray-bearded man called. His voice carried easy over the wind. "I come in peace. Name's Silas Gannon. Preacher, once. I believe I knew a man named Cole Ashford." At the name, Clara stiffened. Bo's voice was flat. "That a threat or a sermon?" The preacher shook his head. "Neither. I've come a long way, son. There are things that need settling." Bo stood between them and the cabin, the rifle resting casual in his hands but not idle. The deputy held his horse back, reading the tension. "I ain't much for settling," Bo said. "Not with strangers riding up on my land." "It's her I need to talk to," Silas said, nodding toward Clara. "Miss Wynn." Bo didn't move. "You can say whatever it is right here." Silas sighed, old weariness showing in the lines of his face. "There was a mistake years back. Cole Ashford wasn't the man they said he was. The one who stole from the county fund. It was Amos Vexler, the mayor himself. Cole found out, and they hung him before he could speak." Clara's breath caught. She felt her knees weaken. "I saw it happen," Silas went on quietly. "I was there that day. Didn't have the courage to stand up. Thought the law would sort itself out." He looked up, eyes shining with guilt. "The law never did." Bo's jaw tightened. "And what do you expect her to do with that now?" "I expect her to know the truth," the preacher said, "and to know that her name's been cleared, though it took too damn long." Jed Holt, the smirking rider, spat into the dirt. "That's all fine talk, preacher, but this ain't a courtroom. Maybe we should get moving." "Shut your mouth, Jed," Deputy Carrick snapped. "We ain't here for trouble." Royce Kellen stayed silent, watching Bo with the cool eyes of a man who measured danger by habit. Silas dismounted slowly, knees stiff. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn leather pouch. "There's something else," he said. "Found this among Cole's effects years ago. Belongs to her." Bo kept his rifle trained as Silas walked forward. When the preacher stopped a few paces short, Bo took the pouch from him. It was old. The leather cracked and sun-darkened. Inside were papers, land records, signed and sealed. The top page bore a single name, Clara Wynn. Clara stared, unable to speak. Silas looked between them, his expression heavy but peaceful. He'd bought that land for her, out past Dalton Creek. Said he wanted her to have a place that was truly hers. She reached out, her fingers trembling. "Why bring it now?" "Because the man who ruined both your lives finally got what was coming," Silas said softly. "Amos Vexler's been caught. They'll hang him come summer." The words fell like a stone between them. Bo looked past the preacher to the other men, reading the truth in their faces. The deputy gave a single nod of confirmation. After a moment, Bo lowered his rifle. "You done what you came to do," he said quietly. Silas gave a faint smile. "Maybe not all of it." He turned to Clara. "You deserve peace, Miss Wynn. Don't waste your days hating ghosts." He tipped his hat, then swung back onto his horse. The others followed, the sound of hooves fading down the trail. Bo and Clara stood there a long while after they'd gone, the leather pouch between them. "What will you do with it?" Bo asked finally. Clara looked toward the horizon, where the red mesa met the blue of the sky. "I'll keep it," she said, "not for what it's worth, but for what it means." Bo nodded. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain. As the sun dropped low, Silas Gannon's figure disappeared into the canyon's bend. In his hand, the reins creaked softly, and though his shoulders were bowed with age and guilt, his face, for the first time in years, looked free. The rain came slow that morning, a soft, steady curtain that swept across Red Mesa, turning the red dust into dark clay. The last of the snow had finally melted, and the mountains breathed again. You could smell life in the air. Wet sage, juniper, and the clean scent of earth waking from winter. Bo tightened the saddle straps on his horse while Clara stood by the fence, the baby cradled close. Wade was near a year old now, a bundle of quiet strength with his mother's eyes. Little Nita danced barefoot in the mud, laughing as rain slid down her hair. Bo looked up at Clara. "You ever been up the ridge?" She shook her head. "No, I've only seen it from here." "Then come on," he said, nodding toward the trail. "There's something I want to show you." They left the children with the old mare grazing near the barn and began the climb. The path wound between wet rocks and pine roots, slick under their boots. The rain kept falling, gentle now, each drop catching the pale light that broke through the clouds. Bo led in silence, his long strides sure and measured. Clara followed close behind, her shawl dark with rain, her hair clinging to her face. At the top, the land opened wide. From there, they could see the whole hollow, the cabin below, the fields greening up, and the river cutting a silver path through the valley. But Bo wasn't looking at the view. He stopped beside an old weathered sign, half buried in moss and time. The wood was gray, cracked, but the letters carved into it were still clear enough to read. Claim Nar 47, Red Mesa. Hollow. Clara brushed her fingers over the carving. Her breath caught in her throat. "I've seen that number before," she whispered. "It was on the papers Silas gave me." Bo nodded. "Yeah, this is it. The land your husband tried to make yours. The one they took." She stared at the sign a long while. The rain washed the dirt from its face, revealing the lines like scars returning to light. "He wanted to bring me here," she said softly. "Said he'd found a place the world hadn't spoiled yet." Bo turned to her, his hat dripping. "Looks like he wasn't wrong." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet pine. Clara closed her eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of Cole's ghost pressing on her shoulders. Just the earth beneath her feet, solid and alive. When she opened her eyes, Bo was holding something in his hand, a necklace of carved wooden beads, worn smooth from years of touch. "This belonged to Luda," he said quietly. "My wife." Clara froze, unsure how to answer. "She made it the winter before she passed. Used to say these beads held prayers." His voice was low, roughened by memory. "She believed souls don't meet by mistake, that God puts folks in each other's path for a reason, even if we don't see it right away." He stepped closer and lifted the necklace. "She'd want you to have it." Clara's throat tightened. "Bo, I can't." "You can," he said simply. "You already carry what she believed in." His calloused fingers brushed the back of her neck as he placed the necklace over her shoulders. The beads were warm from his palm. They rested against her collarbone like a heartbeat. Neither of them spoke. The rain eased to a drizzle, then stopped. The clouds parted, just enough for a shaft of light to cut through. Gold and clean. A rainbow arched across the hollow, faint at first, then brightening until it stretched from one ridge to the other. Its colors shimmered against the gray sky, and for a moment, the land seemed to hold its breath. Clara looked at it, eyes glistening. "You ever seen one that close?" she whispered. Bo smiled faintly. "Not since I was a boy. Didn't think I ever would again." They stood side by side, the sign between them, their hands finding each other without thought. The world was quiet except for the drip of rain off the pines and the soft rustle of the wind. In that silence, forgiveness didn't need words. Bo felt it settle deep in his chest. Not just for her, but for himself, for the years he'd spent cursing the sky for what it took from him. Clara, too, felt the ache in her heart give way to something gentler. The rainbow began to fade, melting into the mist, but the warmth it left behind stayed. When they finally turned to head back down, Bo glanced once more at the ridge, at the old claim marker standing proud against the wind. It was more than a line of ownership now. It was a mark of endurance, of what survived when everything else was taken. Spring deepened over Red Mesa, the kind that came quietly, grass pushing through red soil, rivers loosening from ice, and the sky finally turning that clear, endless blue Bo Ransom hadn't seen in years. The world was thawing, and somehow so were they. Clara spent her mornings in the garden, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She dug her hands into the earth like someone reclaiming her place in it. Nita followed close, planting wildflowers she picked along the ridge, her laughter echoing through the hollow. Bo patched the roof, tightened loose boards, and split cedar for the coming seasons. They didn't talk much, but they didn't have to. The quiet between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was the kind of silence that felt safe. One afternoon, Clara stood by the porch rail, looking out toward the valley where the road disappeared into the horizon. Her mind wandered to Dalton, the town she'd left behind, the lies still written in her name. Bo noticed her stillness and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Thinking on something?" She hesitated. "I keep wondering if I should go back. Let them know the truth, that I wasn't what they said." Bo leaned against a post, chewing on the thought. "You think they'd listen?" "Maybe not," she admitted, "but part of me needs to try." He nodded slowly. "Ain't nothing wrong with wanting your name cleared, but papers and words don't always fix what's broke." Clara turned toward him, eyes searching. "Then what does?" Bo gazed out across the hills. "The way you live. That's what folks remember, even when the law forgets." His words sat heavy in the air, steady as the mountains. She looked down, tracing the edge of Luda's necklace around her neck. "I don't want to spend my life fighting ghosts," Clara said quietly. "I just want a place that feels honest." "You already built it," Bo replied. Later that week, Clara began repairing the smaller cabin out back, what was left of Bo's old tack shed. He offered to help, though she didn't ask. Together they stripped the rot from the beams, replaced planks, and patched the roof with pine boards. Nita ran barefoot through the yard, chasing Wade's crawling steps in the grass. The sound of their laughter carried through the valley. Bo paused his hammering to watch them, sunlight catching in his hair. Clara caught the look on his face, tired but soft, the way a man looks when something broken starts to heal. By dusk, the cabin stood again, rough but strong. Clara leaned against the frame, breathless and proud. "She's not much," she said, "but she's ours." Bo smiled, that faint half-smile he rarely let slip. "Looks like home to me." The word hung there between them, home. It was the first time she'd said it aloud since she'd come to Red Mesa, and it wrapped around them like the warmth of firelight. That night they sat together near the hearth, the children asleep in the loft. The fire cracked and whispered. Clara poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handing one to Bo. He took it, staring into the flames. "You ever think about the ones you lost?" she asked softly. "All the time," he said. "Used to wish I'd gone with them. When the fever took Luda and Koa, I figured God forgot I was still here." He turned the cup in his hands, his voice roughening. "After that, I just quit speaking much, quit caring. Thought silence was easier than remembering." Clara watched the firelight flicker across his face, the deep lines, the scar that cut his cheek, the eyes that still carried winter in them. "What changed?" she asked. He gave a slow, almost sheepish smile. "A little girl laughing in my barn. Thought it was ghosts at first." She laughed softly, eyes glistening. "Nita." "Yeah," Bo said. "Guess she reminded me the world wasn't finished with me yet." Clara reached out, her hand brushing his lightly. "You gave her back the same thing," she said. "A place to belong." The contact lingered, warm against the cool night air. Neither of them pulled away. Outside, the wind carried the smell of rain again, but it was gentle now, not the storm of old. The fire popped once, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Bo's eyes met hers, steady and unguarded. "Maybe that's what living is, Clara," he said. "Not starting over, just learning to stay." She nodded, her throat too tight for words. They sat like that for a long time, two souls who had already lost everything, quietly realizing they'd found something worth keeping. The fire burned low, painting their shadows on the wall. Bo's rough hand rested near hers on the floor. A single ember rose, glowing red against the dark, before fading into the night. Summer came gentle that year, rolling across Red Mesa in slow waves of heat and color. The valley bloomed with wildflowers, white yarrow, blue lupine, patches of yellow daisies that leaned toward the sun. The river ran clear again, and the long grass swayed like green fire under the morning light. Bo was out mending the fence when he heard it, the rhythmic clop of hooves on the old trail. He shaded his eyes and squinted toward the ridge. A rider was cutting through the sunlight, moving steady and sure, dust kicking up behind him. By the time Bo reached the gate, the man had already slowed his horse. He was young, with a clean coat, a leather satchel, and a polite kind of smile. "Mornin'," the stranger said. "Name's Travis Dunn. I'm carrying dispatch from Dalton." Bo nodded, his stance cautious. "What kind of dispatch?" "Official notice from the county office," Travis said, patting the satchel. "Addressed to a Miss Clara Wynn?" Bo's brow lifted. "She's here." Clara came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. The sun lit her hair like copper, and Wade cooed in her arms. Nita peeked from behind her skirts, half curious, half shy. Travis tipped his hat. "Ma'am." He swung off his horse and handed her a folded document, sealed with the county stamp. "Reckon this belongs to you." Clara hesitated, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Bo stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. The words were formal, stiff, written in the kind of ink that carried the weight of years. But their meaning was simple enough. "The office of Mayor Amos Wexler is hereby dissolved pending conviction for fraud and embezzlement. The name of Clara Wynn, previously associated with the case of Cole Ashford, is cleared of all charges and wrongdoings." For a moment, the world went quiet. Only the hum of the wind and the chirp of a meadowlark broke the stillness. Bo let out a slow breath. "Guess that's the kind of justice folks wait a lifetime for." Clara didn't answer right away. She read the letter again, slower this time, as if trying to convince herself it was real. Travis shifted awkwardly. "There's more, ma'am. Paper says your claim on the Red Mesa Hollow stands valid. Land's yours. By right." Clara blinked, looking out over the hills. The same land that had once taken everything from her now seemed to give it back. But somehow it didn't feel like victory, just a closing of a door that should have never been opened. "Thank you," she said softly. Travis tipped his hat again, mounted up, and was gone, his silhouette fading down the ridge. Bo watched him go, then turned back to Clara. "You ought to be happy." "I am," she said, but her voice was distant. "It's just strange. A piece of paper don't change the past." Bo reached out, took the letter gently from her hands and folded it. "That paper don't make you clean, Clara," he said quietly. "You already were." The words hit deep, simple but true. Clara looked up at him, and for the first time since that long, cold winter, she smiled the kind of smile that came from peace, not relief. "Then," she said, "let's bury the rest." Bo frowned slightly. "Bury it?" She nodded. "Everything that tied us to that pain." That afternoon, they walked to the big cottonwood near the edge of the meadow, the one Nita had claimed as her flower tree. The girl was there already, kneeling in the grass, pressing wildflower seeds into the damp earth. Clara knelt beside her. "We'll plant something new right here," she said. Nita giggled. "More flowers, Mama." "Yes, sweetheart, but this one's special." Bo handed Clara the folded letter. Together, they dug a small hole beside the roots. Clara placed the paper inside, her fingers lingering a moment before letting go. Then she and Nita covered it with red soil, soft and warm from the sun. Bo pressed his palm flat over the spot, firm and steady. "There," he said. "Now it's done." Clara stood, brushing her hands clean, her face lifted toward the horizon. "Not done," she murmured. "Just different." Bo looked at her, at the way the wind caught her hair, at the beads around her neck glinting like drops of amber. "Different's good," he said. She smiled, threading her fingers through his. "Yeah," she whispered. "It is." As the day slipped toward dusk, the sky turned the color of embers. The buried letter slept beneath the soil, while above it, Nita's flowers waited for rain. Bo and Clara stood together, their hands still joined, watching the first fireflies appear over the fields. For the first time in a long, long while, justice didn't feel like something written down. It felt like something lived. By late summer, Red Mesa had turned gold. The grasses shimmered under the sun, and the air carried the sweet smell of hay and pine resin. Down in the hollow, hammers struck wood, sawdust drifted through the air like pale smoke, and laughter echoed between the trees. Bo Ransom stood shirt-sleeved on the roof, steady as the ridge itself, setting the last beam into place. Below him, Clara handed up nails, her hands roughened but sure. Her shawl was thrown over a fence post, her hair catching sunlight like copper threads. "You're missing a line there," she called up, pointing. Bo grinned down at her. You planning to run this outfit now? Someone has to, she teased. He laughed, low, easy, a sound that fit the land. Fair enough. When the last board was nailed, they stood back to look at it. A new cabin, sturdy and wide-porched, built from the bones of old timber and the patience of two people who'd learned to stay. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, just like them. On the porch rail leaned two small figures, Nita, her hair in braids, and little Wade, clapping his hands at the sight of his father's work. The girl had learned to whistle for the horses, and the baby, barefoot and steady on new legs, followed her everywhere she went. Think he'll be walking by fall, Bo said. Clara smiled. He already is, just not always in a straight line. Bo knelt beside the porch step where a wide plank waited, still blank. In his hand was a small carving knife, its handle worn smooth. He pressed the blade into the wood and began to cut slow, careful strokes. Clara crouched beside him, watching as letters took shape beneath his hands. Ransom Hollow. He paused to wipe the sawdust from the grooves. Figured the place needed a name. Clara traced the letters with her fingertip. Why that one? Because that's what we are, Bo said. A hollow in the hills where life came back. She nodded. Then it's perfect. Above the name, he carved two birds, one already finished, strong-winged and clear. Beside it, another still half done. This one's yours, he said. Clara took the knife, hesitated, then set to carving. Her lines weren't as clean, her hand less practiced, but Bo didn't correct her. He only watched as she shaped the second bird, smaller, gentler, its wings open wide. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, cheeks flushed. Bo studied the carving for a long moment. Not bad, Clara Wynn, she smiled. Not bad for a man who said he'd never build again. That afternoon, they hung the sign over the doorway. The two carved birds caught the light, and the name below them gleamed in the setting sun. Life fell into a quiet rhythm after that. Days began with the cry of roosters and ended with the smell of firewood and coffee. Nita learned to ride bareback across the meadow, her laughter rising over the thunder of hooves. Wade toddled behind Bo in the barn, dragging a little wooden hammer wherever he went. Some nights Clara would sing soft Apache songs by the fire, songs her mother used to hum under the stars. Bo never understood the words, but he listened all the same, knowing that peace had a language of its own. They never spoke about marriage. There was no preacher, no paper, no promise beyond what they'd already built with their hands. But anyone who passed through Red Mesa and saw them, working side by side, raising two children beneath the same roof, knew they didn't need one. One evening, when the sky turned copper and purple, Bo sat on the porch steps with Wade asleep in his arms. Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching Nita chase fireflies through the tall grass. Never figured I'd get this far, Bo said quietly. Clara smiled. Far? He nodded toward the land stretching out below them. From the man I used to be, from the storm, from all that noise inside my head. She came down beside him, her hand resting lightly over his. Maybe peace ain't a place you find, she said. Maybe it's the one you build. Bo looked at her then, and there it was. The kind of love that didn't ask or demand, just was. The sun slipped lower, painting everything in amber. The sign above the door creaked softly in the evening breeze, the two birds rocking side by side. From the field came the sound of Nita's laughter and the faint cry of a nightbird calling home. Bo squeezed Clara's hand. Looks like we got ourselves a family, he said. She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. We always did, Bo. Just took us a while to see it. The last of the light melted across the hills, setting the world on fire with gold. In that glow, the cabin stood strong, the name above the door catching every drop of sun before it disappeared. And from inside, the echo of children's laughter rolled out across Red Mesa, soft, bright, and endless. Years passed quietly in the shadow of Red Mesa. What had once been a hollow of grief and storm grew into a small, breathing world of its own. A ranch that smelled of cut hay, saddle leather, and rain-soaked pine. Bo Ransom rose before dawn each morning, the way men of the frontier always did. The low hum of the wind through the cottonwoods, the soft nicker of horses in the barn. Those were the sounds that told him he was still alive, that he still belonged here. Clara would follow not long after, barefoot across the wooden floor, hair loose over her shoulders, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Sometimes she'd hum that same Apache lullaby she once sang to Nita and Wade when they were small. Even now, it made the mornings feel whole. The children had grown with the land. Nita rode her own bay mare now, strong and sure, a bright scarf tied in her braid. Wade trailed behind her on a smaller pony, shouting as he chased the wind, his laughter echoing off the red cliffs. The ranch wasn't rich, but it was honest. Fields of alfalfa swayed where snow once buried sorrow. A new barn stood where the old one had burned. The sign above the door still read, Ransom Hollow, its carved birds weathered but proud. One afternoon when the light hit just right, a lone rider came down the ridge. Bo recognized that steady, uneven gait before he saw the face. Silas Gannon, older now, his shoulders bent, beard gone silver. Bo met him at the gate. "You found your way back." Silas smiled, eyes soft. "Didn't reckon I'd leave this earth without seeing what the Lord made of your second chance." Clara stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Nita waved from the corral. The pastor's eyes glistened as he took it all in. The cabin, the laughter, the peace that seemed stitched into the wind. "I remember the first time I rode up here," he said. "All I saw then was ruin. Now look at it. You and this woman, you built something that matters." Bo nodded, a quiet pride rising in his chest. "Took both of us to tame this land. Maybe it tamed us right back." Silas chuckled. "Maybe that's how the good Lord works. Lets the land finish what grief couldn't." They sat on the porch until the sun dipped low, talking about the old days, the ones they no longer feared to remember. When the pastor finally rose to leave, he rested a hand on Bo's shoulder. "Your story changed this land, son," he said softly. "Make sure it remembers why." Bo didn't quite know what to say. He only nodded, feeling the words settle deep, like seeds under the soil. Silas rode off into the dusk, his figure fading against the crimson hills. The kind of goodbye that didn't need words. A few months later, word came from town that he'd passed peacefully in his sleep. That winter, Bo took his knife and climbed the ladder into the rafters of the cabin. The wood was rough beneath his palms, the smell of cedar and smoke thick in the air. He carved a single line into the beam above the hearth, each letter deliberate, each stroke carrying the weight of years. "This land remembers kindness." When Clara found him there, she didn't speak. She only smiled, touching the letters with gentle fingers, her eyes bright in the firelight. Spring returned again, soft and golden. The valley woke in green, and life rolled forward as it always had. At dawn, Clara stood beside Bo at the porch rail. The horizon burned with color, rose, amber, silver, spilling light across the grasslands. Below, Nita and Wade ran through the fields, chasing one another through wildflowers, their laughter as bright as birdsong. Bo wrapped an arm around Clara's shoulders. "You ever think this place remembers everything we done?" he asked quietly. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "It remembers who we became," she said, "not who we were." He nodded, eyes sweeping the land that had seen every part of their story. The storms, the births, the reckonings, the small mercies that stitched it all together. In the distance, the horses grazed near the ridge. A hawk circled high above. The flag over the barn snapped in the morning breeze. Everything, every sound, every color, felt alive with memory. The sun climbed higher, gilding the hills, touching every scar and furrow with light. And if someone had been watching from afar that morning, they'd have seen a picture worth remembering. A man and woman standing side by side, 2 children racing through the tall grass, the mountains rising behind them like ancient guardians. Red Mesa was no longer the place of loss it once was. It was something living, something good. Proof that even the hardest soil can grow grace if you tend it long enough. The wind swept through the valley, stirring the carved sign above the door. The 2 wooden birds creaked gently, still side by side, wings open to the sky. Bo smiled as he watched the light spill over the ridge. "Reckon she's right," he murmured. "The land remembers." Clara reached for his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "And so will they." He looked down the valley one last time, at the laughter, the horses, the home they'd built, and knew she was right.